public sector unions representing scientists are planning protests across the country today. They say the federal government is putting too many restrictions on them and their research, and that is creating a toxic work environment. Steve Campana says he was muzzled by the government. He recently, by the way, retired 3 years early from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. He now works with the University of Iceland. Steve Campana joins me live from Reykjavik. Hello to you, sir. I want to know what muzzled means in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Well, muzzled in my case means taking a situation where I gave a lot of interviews on sharks, which are one of the things I did research on, and I was basically shut down. I lost about 95% of my ability to talk about research that we had done, not about policy issues, but about the facts, the research that we had come up with, many of which were good news stories for Canadians who, of course, pay for this with their tax dollars. And I was refused the ability, I guess, to speak to the public about our findings.
Are you able to speak now that you're no longer part of the government science community?
Well, I am. I am not sure if I'm allowed to or not, and quite frankly, I don't care anymore. It reached the point where I actually retired early because things had gotten so bad in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans where I worked. And so although I've retired from there, I'm now working at basically the same job in another country, simply because I love what I do.
So what did you find about sharks that might have made things different in Canada?
Well, the shark stories are, I think, more of general interest. For instance, we did research with satellite tags that found that porbeagle sharks, which are, they look like a small great white, essentially, going down to the Sargasso Sea to give birth. So it's totally non-controversial, and it's something that I think a lot of Canadians would have been interested in. And I put in the media request months in advance to spread the word, and I never got it.
Yeah.
And then a more pressing example is when we came up with an exciting new way to age lobster and shrimp, which sounds maybe a little esoteric, but it would actually revolutionize the ability to figure out how many lobster and shrimp are in our waters and indeed in other countries' waters. And again, we had the media briefing prepared and everything, and we were refused permission to speak. And eventually the word leaked out through the United States, and I got picked up by dozens, hundreds of media outlets around the world.
And Steve, were you given a reason as to why you could not speak out?
Never something that made much logical sense. Certainly the refusal to give permission on something that might criticize government policy. You know what? Nobody has any problem with that. I mean, that's not my job to criticize government policy. But when we're talking about facts, then it's a whole different matter, and no, we were never given a good reason why that should be the case. You
know, I know you're up there in Reykjavik in Iceland, but you're probably keeping an eye on what's happening here because unions representing federal scientists, Steve, they're rallying today. They're protesting some of those restrictions that you mentioned. Do you think, however, that it's going to make a difference?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I guess any noise that can be made, any alert that can be passed on to the Canadian public, it can't hurt, for sure. And I guess the key thing that I keep thinking of is that this is research that is being paid for by the Canadian taxpayers with their tax dollars. And it's something that would, in many cases, help them, and they would be interested in it. So I would hope that there will be some shift away from this policy to keep things quiet and spread some of this information out.
And I suppose what we can extrapolate from this is that, somebody might not be interested in sharks or aging lobsters, but there might be some other research that they are interested in. Your point is that, as taxpayers, we have a right to this knowledge.
That's exactly it. It's taxpayer-funded research. It should be spread out. We're long past the age where scientists are working on quirky little projects that have no value. This is very applied research that in many cases can lead to economic, financial advantages to Canadians. And again, we're not being allowed to speak about it.
Very quickly, Steve, where you are now, do they treat you differently?
Oh, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's unbelievable. Not just the media thing. In the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we've been cut back financially, which, again, people don't have a problem with because they know there's fiscal realities. But we had all sorts of roadblocks put in place to getting funding from other sources. And That doesn't make sense. So it's a very different atmosphere here in Iceland and indeed in many countries around the world, and that's unfortunate.
I want to thank you for your time, sir. I wish you the best.
Thank you, Susanna.
Former federal government scientist Steve Campana in Reykjavik.